Be careful with your sister because very soon she is going to make a decision that nobody in your family sees coming. Before you dismiss that sentence, listen carefully. Because this is not a story about blame. It is not a story about betrayal. And it is not a story about predicting the future. It is a story about the small signs people ignore until one day everything changes. Think about the last conversation you had with your sister. Not the long conversation. The short one. The one where she smiled and said she was fine. The one where she changed the subject. The one where she laughed for a second and then became unusually quiet. Most people never pay attention to moments like that. But sometimes the biggest changes in life announce themselves in whispers before they arrive as thunder. And that is exactly why you need to stay until the end of this story. Because what starts as an ordinary family situation slowly becomes something far more surprising. Imagine this. A brother believes everything is normal. His sister wakes up every morning, goes about her routine, speaks to the family, shares meals, and appears completely ordinary. Nothing seems unusual. Nothing seems alarming. Nothing seems different. But what nobody knows is that she has been carrying a secret. Not a dangerous secret. Not a criminal secret. A life-changing secret. A secret so powerful that once it is revealed, every relationship in the family begins to look different. And the strangest part? The clues were there all along. The family simply never noticed. Have you ever met someone who slowly stopped sharing their dreams? Someone who used to tell everyone what they wanted but suddenly became private? Someone who started spending more time alone? Someone who seemed distracted by thoughts they never explained? That is where this story begins. Because sometimes a person becomes quiet not because they have given up, but because they are preparing for something. Something important. Something that could change their entire future. For months, the sister in this story listens more than she speaks. She observes. She thinks. She plans. And every day she becomes more certain about a decision she has been afraid to make. A decision that will shock everyone. The family believes they know her. But do they really? Do we ever fully know the people closest to us? Or do we only know the version of them that they choose to show us? That question becomes more important as the story unfolds. One evening, during a family gathering, everyone is talking. The room is loud. People are laughing. Phones are ringing. The television is on. And in the middle of all that noise, something unusual happens. The sister goes silent. Not for a minute. Not for 5 minutes. For the entire evening. Nobody notices. Nobody asks. Nobody wonders why. And that is when the narrator of this story realizes something powerful. People often notice dramatic changes. But they rarely notice emotional changes. A person can be hurting in front of everyone and still remain invisible. A person can be preparing to leave one chapter of life and enter another without anyone realizing it. Days pass. Weeks pass. Then another clue appears. She begins organizing things. Old notebooks. Old photos. Old messages. Old memories. She spends hours sorting through pieces of her past. To everyone else it looks ordinary. But people only do that when they are emotionally preparing for a new future. And that future is approaching faster than anyone realizes. Now here comes the surprising part. The family assumes her silence means weakness. They assume her distance means confusion. They assume her hesitation means fear. They are completely wrong. Because beneath that silence is courage. The kind of courage that grows quietly. The kind that nobody notices until the moment it changes everything. One morning she wakes up and looks at herself in the mirror. For the first time in years she asks a question. Not what others expect from her. Not what society wants from her. Not what her family hopes she will do. She asks what she truly wants. And that question becomes the beginning of a transformation. A transformation that nobody can stop. From that moment forward, she starts seeing life differently. The expectations around her begin to lose their power. The opinions around her become less important. The fears that once controlled her start fading away. And little by little, the person everyone thought they knew begins disappearing. In her place emerges someone stronger. Someone wiser. Someone determined. Someone ready. Ready for what? That is the question. The answer arrives on a day nobody expects. A completely ordinary day. No dramatic music. No warning. No announcement. Just a normal afternoon. And then she says it. A single sentence. A sentence so unexpected that the entire room freezes. The sentence is simple. I've made my decision. Silence. Nobody speaks. Nobody moves. Because suddenly everyone realizes that while they were busy living their lives, she had been quietly building hers. Months of thinking. Months of planning. Months of preparing. All hidden beneath ordinary conversations and ordinary smiles. The family begins asking questions. Many questions. But the answers reveal something even more surprising. The decision was not impulsive. It was not emotional. It was not reckless. It was the result of deep reflection. She knew exactly what she was doing. And for the first time, everyone sees her not as a child. Not as someone's daughter. Not as someone's sister. But as her own person. Someone capable of choosing her own path. That realization is difficult for many people. Because families often become attached to old versions of people. They remember who someone was. But they struggle to accept who someone is becoming. And that is where the real lesson of this story begins. Be careful with your sister. Not because she is dangerous. Not because she is hiding something bad. But because she may be growing in ways you do not yet understand. She may be carrying dreams she has never spoken aloud. She may be fighting battles she has never described. She may be preparing for opportunities she has never mentioned. And if you ignore the signs, one day her transformation will feel sudden even though it took years. That is the great illusion of change. The biggest changes always appear sudden to people who were not paying attention. As the story reaches its final chapter, the family slowly understands something profound. Love is not control. Love is not ownership. Love is not deciding someone else's future. Love is supporting the people you care about as they become who they are meant to be. And when they finally understand that lesson, everything changes. The sister is no longer viewed as someone who needs permission. She is viewed as someone who deserves respect. The family becomes stronger. The relationships become deeper. The conversations become more honest. And what once looked like a shocking decision becomes the beginning of a beautiful new chapter. So if you have a sister, pay attention. Listen carefully. Notice the things she doesn't say. Notice the dreams she keeps private. Notice the strength she hides behind ordinary moments. Because the next big change in her life may already be happening. Quietly. Silently. One decision at a time. And when that moment finally arrives, the greatest surprise will not be what she chooses. The greatest surprise will be realizing she had the courage to choose it all along. The moment her words left her mouth, the atmosphere in the room changed. Nobody expected it. Nobody prepared for it. And yet, deep down, everyone felt something strange. A feeling that this moment had been coming for a very long time. The family stared at her. Questions filled the air. Some people were shocked. Some were confused. Some were worried. But the sister remained calm. For the first time in years, she looked completely certain. That certainty frightened people more than the decision itself. Because uncertainty can be challenged. Certainty cannot. The room became silent. And then someone asked the question everyone was thinking. When did you decide this? Her answer stunned everyone. A long time ago. Not yesterday. Not last week. Not last month. A long time ago. The family looked at each other. How could something this important happen without them knowing? How could someone they saw every day carry such a huge decision inside them for so long? The answer was simple. People hear words. But they don't always hear feelings. People see faces. But they don't always see emotions. People notice actions. But they don't always notice changes. And that is exactly what happened. For years she had been evolving. Growing. Learning. Changing. Yet everyone around her continued seeing the old version. The version they were comfortable with. The version they understood. The version they expected her to remain forever. But life doesn't work that way. People grow. People transform. People outgrow old expectations. And sometimes that transformation becomes impossible to hide. That night nobody slept peacefully. The conversation kept replaying in everyone's mind. Especially in the mind of her brother. Because suddenly he began remembering things. Tiny details. Tiny moments. Tiny clues. Things that seemed meaningless at the time. But now looked completely different. He remembered how she would stare out the window for long periods. He remembered how she became less interested in arguments. He remembered how she stopped seeking approval. He remembered how she smiled differently. Not happier. Not sadder. Just different. As though she knew something nobody else knew. The next morning he decided to speak with her alone. Not as a brother trying to control her. Not as someone trying to change her mind. But as someone trying to understand. And what happened during that conversation changed everything. She told him something she had never told anyone before. For years she had been living according to expectations. Expectations from relatives. Expectations from friends. Expectations from society. Expectations from people who believed they knew what was best for her. And every time she followed those expectations, she felt herself becoming smaller. A little less alive. A little less authentic. A little less herself. Until one day she realized something terrifying. She was living a life that looked right on the outside but felt wrong on the inside. That realization became impossible to ignore. At first she tried to suppress it. Then she tried to forget it. Then she tried convincing herself she was overthinking. But the feeling never disappeared. Instead, it grew stronger. Month after month. Year after year. Until finally she reached a point where staying the same felt more frightening than changing. That was the real reason behind her decision. Not rebellion. Not impulsiveness. Not selfishness. Courage. Pure courage. The courage to face uncertainty. The courage to disappoint expectations. The courage to choose authenticity over comfort. As she spoke, her brother began seeing her differently. Not as a younger sister. Not as someone who needed protection. But as a human being carrying dreams, fears, hopes, and struggles that he had never fully understood. And for the first time, he felt guilty. Not because he had done something wrong. But because he had assumed he already knew everything about her. Most people make that mistake. They believe proximity equals understanding. They believe living with someone means knowing them completely. But human beings are deeper than that. Every person carries hidden chapters. Hidden fears. Hidden ambitions. Hidden battles. Even the people we love most. Days passed. The family slowly adjusted to reality. Some accepted it quickly. Others struggled. A few resisted completely. But the sister remained steady. She no longer needed validation. She no longer needed permission. She no longer needed everyone to agree. That inner strength became impossible to ignore. Then something unexpected happened. People outside the family began noticing the change too. Friends commented on it. Neighbors sensed it. Co-workers observed it. There was something different about her. Something powerful. Something magnetic. She seemed lighter. More confident. More alive. Because when people stop pretending and start living honestly, it shows. It shows in their eyes. It shows in their posture. It shows in their voice. And it definitely showed in hers. Weeks later another surprise arrived. A huge one. The opportunity she had quietly been preparing for finally appeared. The opportunity everyone thought was impossible. The opportunity people had laughed at. The opportunity nobody believed would become real. Suddenly it was right in front of her. And because she had spent so much time preparing, she was ready. Everyone else saw luck. She saw preparation. Everyone else saw a miracle. She saw years of determination. Everyone else saw sudden success. She saw invisible effort. That is one of life's greatest secrets. People celebrate the result. But they rarely witness the process. They admire the victory. But they overlook the sacrifice. They notice the destination. But they ignore the journey. The family watched in amazement. Everything they feared was happening. Yet somehow everything was turning out better than expected. The sister who once seemed uncertain was now leading her own future. The sister who once appeared quiet was now speaking with confidence. The sister they worried about was becoming an inspiration. And that realization forced everyone to confront a difficult truth. Maybe they had underestimated her. Maybe they had mistaken silence for weakness. Maybe they had confused patience with passivity. Maybe they had never truly seen how strong she was. One evening, months after her announcement, the family gathered again. The same room. The same chairs. The same people. Yet everything felt different. Because now they were looking at her with new eyes. Eyes filled with respect instead of assumptions. Eyes filled with admiration instead of doubt. Eyes filled with understanding instead of fear. During dinner someone asked her a question. What was the hardest part? Her answer was unforgettable. The hardest part wasn't making the decision. Everyone waited. She continued. The hardest part was believing I was allowed to make it. Silence filled the room. Because everyone understood exactly what she meant. Many people spend their lives waiting for permission. Permission to dream. Permission to change. Permission to grow. Permission to become who they truly are. But that permission rarely comes. At some point, we must give it to ourselves. That was the lesson she learned. And that lesson changed her life forever. As this story comes to an end, there is one final truth worth remembering. Be careful with your sister because very soon she might become someone extraordinary. Not because of luck. Not because of fate. Not because of magic. But because she finally stopped living according to everyone else's expectations. And when a person discovers that kind of freedom, remarkable things begin to happen. So watch closely. Listen carefully. Pay attention to the quiet changes. Because the strongest transformations rarely announce themselves. They happen slowly. Silently. One choice at a time. Until one day the world looks at that person and calls them extraordinary. Without realizing they were becoming extraordinary all along. And perhaps, at this very moment, your sister is standing at the beginning of that journey. A journey that will surprise everyone. Including herself.